Alex here with a video on the Brittany Spears conservatorship, um, I guess, ordeal. It's all over the internet.
On another occasion, she refused to perform in Las Vegas. Her therapist sat her down and told her she was not cooperating at the rehearsals and she has not been taking her medication. Brittany said that these claims were false. Brittany said that her father loved having control over someone as powerful as her. He loved the control to hurt his own daughter 100,000%. Brittany was working 10 hours a day, 7 days a week. She went on to say that she's been in denial, in shock, she was traumatized. She's not happy, cannot sleep, is angry, depressed, and she cries every day. She would like to sue her family, share her story, and pick her own attorney. Brittany's actually forced to pay the people who are controlling her. So she's funding the attorneys who are working against what she wants. She doesn't believe in therapy. She takes her problems to God, but she would be willing to be treated at her home where she would not have to be embarrassed by the paparazzi. She doesn't really seem to have an ally. She's alone. I found this part of Brittany's statement to be particularly compelling. I think it speaks to the importance of transparency in this type of legal guardianship. If she is released from the legal guardianship, maybe she will make mistakes. Maybe mental health symptoms will interfere, but to what degree? Should that not be weighed against her autonomy, her right to make mistakes, her right to make decisions, whether they are good, bad, or indifferent? Something else to consider: what is the cost of trying to protect her? If the guardianship is hurting her, if she feels controlled and manipulated, is that any better than just letting her make her own decisions? Maybe the treatment is worse than the illness.
Apparently, I should stop here for a second. For those of you who are in Nevada, we don't call it conservatorship here. It's just, it falls under adult guardianship, but the principles are the same. When a person is placed under an adult guardianship slash conservatorship, if that's what they call it in your state, the court determines who should be in control of the person and the estate. And with regards to the estate, that's the money and the finances and all that. And with regards to the person, that's literally control over their lives. I have a video on guardianship. I think it's under the high conflict child custody category. You can take a look at that video and I go into some details. The knowledge that I have on guardianship is very limited, which is why I was hesitant to make a video on this topic. But then I realized there's actually a lot to talk about that falls into, I guess you could call it, legal nuts and bolts and issues with the public slash press approach versus statutes, rules, and case law. So there ended up being quite a bit that I can go into with this topic, even though I thought initially that there wasn't much I could do to provide a perspective. So the first thing that I want to point out is the laws are apparently quite different in California. I know that in Nevada, you have to be mentally incompetent. They also call it incapacitated to be placed under guardianship, and it's a pretty high bar here in the state. It typically involves a person not being able to make decisions. This is very different from a person who makes bad decisions or a person who has mental health issues. A lot of people have mental health issues. Almost everyone has some kind of issue in that area, but apparently in California, those types of things are enough. I'm not going to go into the details because, as I mentioned, I don't know very much about guardianship slash conservatorship. But what I would do if anyone wants to get into the weeds on this issue is take a look at the video Legal Eagle published to their channel on the topic. They go, or he goes, it's an attorney, it's actually a trial attorney. He goes through a lot of the details as to how it works in California. So that is one of the biggest things that just stands out to me, because apparently Britney Spears actually has been working for a long time and like doing shows and stuff, and she's making so much money that she's supporting all these other people, and she's apparently also making so much money that she's supporting all of the attorneys who are fighting against her. I guess this is a good opportunity to dovetail into one of the biggest issues that I have always had with guardianship. Even though I don't know much about it, I do think there are a lot of conflicts of interest. And the reason I say that is because my understanding is that under the law, once a person is placed under guardianship, they have to pay not only for their own court appointed attorney, but also for the guardian ad litem and for the, in a roundabout way, they sort of end up paying for the attorneys who are filing petitions in the case, which often are the attorneys who are working against the person under guardianship. And the way that happens is there are statutes, at least in Nevada, that allow the court to um, pay expenses out of the protected person's estate. They also call it a ward. If an attorney was in some way furthering, I guess, the case, there has to be some kind of attempt that moved the case along by the attorney, and that allows the attorney to get paid out of the protected person's money, even if they're actually doing things that the protected person says they don't want done. So that's one of the biggest conflicts of interest because there's a sort of a financial motive there. And this kind of situation is exacerbated so badly by two other things that I really want to talk about. For a long time on the channel, I've talked about the issue of high conflict child custody generally, and divorce generally, and that because mothers and fathers don't have, at least in Nevada, a lobby that goes to the legislature and consistently insists, pushes for, and twists the arms of those legislators to enact statutes that are actually beneficial to families and kids, there ends up being this power vacuum. And who fills the vacuum? The family bench bar, the attorneys and the judges who are practicing in these areas. And because they have so much sway and so much control over the legislation that is considered, it ends up being, in my very strong opinion, that the statutes that have been created put the attorneys and the judiciary first, and they put families second. And in a nutshell, it seems to me that most of the statutory language that is in place sort of facilitates this system of conveyor belts where they put families on the conveyor belt, run them through the assembly line, fleece them of a bunch of money, spit them out the other end, and move on to the next case. And it's created, I think, the situation that this country and maybe even the world is in, because there just isn't any sort of strong lobbying force to really stand up to the attorneys and the judges that are in, for the most part, control of the entire statutory scheme. And what I wanted to sort of step into was that this problem gets even worse with guardianship and probate. And the reason why is because you've already got, I mean, you're not even talking about all the attorneys, which are 1% of the population roughly. You're talking about a subset of the attorneys, the family law attorneys. Going into guardianship and probate, you go into an even tinier subset of attorneys. Maybe even in a city like Vegas, maybe there's just 3 or 4 dozen of these attorneys who go before a judge or two. Like, it's probably 1 or 2. And this sort of community, this teeny tiny subset of a community, is in control of the guardianship and probate and all that sort of stuff. Unless there is some other lobby to stand up to them, that's typically what's going to happen. Every legislative session, this group is going to be the group that proposes things, and nobody's going to really have a voice. And so, typically I would be really cautious about making such a bold claim to say that such a tiny handful of people controls that entire system, which infects all of the families in this state, especially the elderly. But I am not so hesitant to do so because of the guardianship scandal. For those of you who don't know, Clark County, Las Vegas, Nevada is on Netflix. There's a video called The Guardians. I think that's what it's called. It's a documentary on horrible, horrible things that were occurring to people placed under guardianship in our state. And apparently it happened in other states too. There have been some mentions in the media from other states who've cried out for help. And you know what? There's not even just a documentary. I think there's now like a second video on this issue, but it's more sensationalized, and it's not a documentary. I know it has that character from Game of Thrones. I think his name in Game of Thrones it was Tyrion Lannister. And anyway, both the documentary and the other show or movie are really good, and they are both in Netflix if I remember correctly. One of them might be on Amazon. And anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'm trying to say is there's a ton of news that came out. There were criminal prosecutions. There are private guardians who are in prison right now over what they were doing to people. So it's not just a theory. It actually happened and blew up in everyone's face. And then it triggered all kinds of reforms, which I think there were some steps in the right direction, but I don't think that it came even close to solving all of the issues. So that's the first thing that I wanted to mention. The second thing that I wanted to mention is the complete and total lack of transparency. Maybe I shouldn't say complete and total. Maybe there is some transparency with regards to getting records. But from what I have seen, California must have some type of really draconian statutes when it comes to press coverage of those proceedings. Because apparently somebody had to break the rules to get out Brittany Spears' testimony to the judge. There's like a leaked audio online, and it's not even the whole proceeding. It's just Brittany Spears' testimony in the case. So not even the whole case was leaked. But it is so sad that those gigantic media entities that were covering, I think it was, I mean, I can't imagine CNN, CBS, Fox News. At least I know that there's a lot of gossip stuff, but even the big news stations are talking about it. It's really alarming to me that they couldn't get electronic coverage of that proceeding, because I'm sure hundreds of millions of people would have watched it. And what really shows you the contrast between California and Nevada is that those colossal media giants weren't able to get a camera in the courtroom. And I, with our Nevada judges and like 2,000 subscribers, was able to get a camera into not only one guardianship proceeding, but two. That is why so many people do not trust these systems. Is because first, they have control over all of the rules that the rest of us have to follow. And second, they don't even let us see what's going on. It's this idea that people are just going to blindly trust the judiciary, which is just not true anymore. Nowadays, when things are done behind closed doors, people don't automatically or by default assume that everything happened correctly. Nowadays, people think something shady was going on. And then conspiracy theories start to just pop up all over the place, which is what's happening now. And there's a lot of people who are like, well, you can't tell what the judge is thinking or what the lawyers are saying or what's going on in a case. Well, you could if you could show people. So that is the second issue that really jumped out at me, is that you can get camera access to guardianship proceedings in Nevada, but you can't get camera access to guardianship or conservatorship proceedings in California. I'm just assuming that. I mean, it would be even more shocking and appalling to me to know that the press in California didn't file a media request. They most likely tried, or there maybe is a law that just bans it, and so they didn't even try because of that law. So those are the two huge things that I wanted to say is what leads to situations like this. And I talked about the conflict of interest issue already. So really, there's only a couple of more things for me to talk about in conclusion. The first thing is that I am genuinely surprised that Brittany Spears was not able to resolve this issue with press coverage. I am not a huge celebrity gossip person, but I do know the Brittany Spears name is a big deal. I would guess that she has tens of millions or hundreds of millions of fans. I would guess that. And I would guess that those fans would be outraged by what she's going through, especially considering what she told the judge when she testified. And for nothing to have happened is a surprise to me, because it's not right. I don't think that judges should be pressured by the press to make certain rulings. I don't agree with that. But I've seen that happen before. And I've talked about it on this channel before a few times. I'm not quite sure how many times exactly, but I know I've talked about that before. So when this happened in this particular situation, I was genuinely surprised because a lot of people cry for help. A lot of people go through problems with the family court system and they ask the press for help and they don't get any help. Brittany Spears did get help, and it is blown up all over the internet and on TV, and it didn't matter. So that actually did surprise me. And I did want to point that out to the viewers because it just goes to show you that these cases are decided by statutes, rules, and case law. And when you set up a statutory scheme that enables certain abuses to occur, those abuses are going to occur. I've talked about this in the video, fairness versus the law. People in this country and maybe the world think everything's going to be fair and screw the law, who cares? Well, the laws were not set up that way. And so things are happening that are now outrageous. There's a lot of issues with the Britney Spears case that are controversial, and there's two sides to a story, but there are a lot of issues also that there's no way to explain away. There's no way to justify. People make mistakes all the time. People make bad decisions all the time. People have mental health issues. These are fairly common issues, and people have a right to make mistakes. The idea that you can go up to somebody and say, you don't know what you're doing, you're a moron, you cut your hair off and you were bald in front of paparazzis and all this other stuff, so since you're insane, we're just going to control your life. That idea is insane, because if it was actually a thing, you would probably see like 25% of the population under guardianship. That's not how it's working out. If you look at what's happening by watching the documentary, The Guardians, and what's going on with Britney Spears, what's happening is there are certain people who have a lot of money, and those people are able to be exploited and fleeced. And this sort of trend that I've seen is, if you have a lot of money, well, guardianship is for you. And if you don't, if you're dirt poor and you're living homeless on the street and you're just babbling incoherently and wandering, you don't have any money. You're fine. You don't need a guardianship. You can just go out and die. Who cares? You know what? There have even been cases where there was so much money involved in the case, and there were heated guardianship battles. In fact, we've recorded some of them on the Our Nevada Judges channel. We've recorded two of them. As I mentioned, we were able to get camera access. And these two that I actually recorded are not good examples from what I'm about to say. But I have heard that in other cases, the money dries up, and all of a sudden, the person's fine now. They don't need a guardianship anymore. Or maybe the private guardians, like, they're all out of money. They can't afford me anymore. We should put them under the public guardian or something like that. They just dump the person off on the government. That screams volumes that it's more of a money situation than it is a situation of trying to help people. And it's so sad that a lot of people have no clue that this is going on. And it's nice now that with the documentary and that other movie, more people are waking up to it. It's nice that with the situation Britney Spears is going through, a lot of more people are growing up to it, are finding out about it. But the situation remains the same. Britney Spears and all of these people can cry and scream and protest what's going on with these guardianship and conservatorship cases, but unless the statutes, rules, and case law change, mainly the statutes, the system won't change. And without ordinary people, not these attorneys, getting control of these sectors of law that we've just left to them, you're just not going to see anything improve for the better. Whoever is in control of a statutory scheme is going to engineer that statutory scheme to favor their business. So many people complain about all of the money that's involved in child support and child custody and divorce court, and now we have the guardianship and conservatorship issues. Everyone just complains about, these things are all money centric. Well, the people who are making the rules make money off those rules. You cannot expect them to make the decision that is going to actually fix this problem. They might make some concessions. They might maybe not be as greedy, but they are the ones who have built businesses around these laws. And so until, especially now, I'm convinced now more than ever, given the fact that all of this outrage is going on with Britney Spears, and nothing, it didn't matter, nothing has changed. And she apparently, the judge apparently denied Britney's request to terminate the conservatorship. um, more than ever, I'm convinced that um, ordinary people have to find some way to either take control of the statutory schemes themselves or support some kind of special interest lobby or something that actually cares about them and not about the actual, the firms and the attorneys and all that, that can actually force the change that needs to occur. If you see the types of laws that are in place, you will find out that these judges aren't breaking any rules. They might be enabling the attorneys who are involved to break rules, but they're not really breaking any rules, and that's because, in large part, the issue of discretion. Please watch my video on the topic of discretion if you haven't seen it yet. But from what I have seen, the laws have these gigantic discretionary windows that allow the judges so much latitude that enable the attorneys to argue for almost anything. And that is, in fact, what ends up occurring. They argue for all sorts of things. I heard that, I guess, Britney Spears' father got it approved by the court that he was supposed to get like a cut of the money that Britney Spears makes from these shows. That is very, very strange and alarming. Yeah, it's one thing to get paid for your work and your time, but it's another thing to be sort of cut into a contract like that. If you're going to be a guardianship, you should be paid, you know, for the work that goes into, dealing with the guardianship. But it's another thing completely to say, hey, since you're out there doing all these shows, I want a percentage. That is so alarming. And then there was another, apparently, the amount of money that these attorneys are getting is staggering. Apparently, the court appointed attorney, the attorney that's appointed to represent Britney Spears, gets like $10,000 a week. Apparently, Jamie Spears, which is her father, gets like $6,000 a week in allowance or something like that. What's really sad is from what I read, Britney Spears only gets $2,000. She gets the least. All these other people are getting more of her money than she is. And that is concerning to me because it creates a very dangerous motive for all of the people who are getting all of that money to do whatever they can in their power to keep the guardianship / conservatorship going. It's just, the other issue is, I mentioned she had a court-appointed attorney. In Nevada, this actually came up. I really wish I could remember the case off the top of my head, but it came up that a protected person wanted to hire their own attorney. They didn't want the court-appointed attorney anymore. And in Nevada, the judge said, no, you can't do that because you're not competent to enter into a contract, which is scary, but apparently that's what they do in California. Apparently, you can't hire your own attorney if you're under a guardianship. Whoa. In Nevada, that didn't work. The Supreme Court reversed the decision, sent it back, and I can't remember if it was a published or unpublished decision, but that didn't fly here. And I think it was unanimous en banc. Which is the entire bench and all of the justices voted the same way, that's insane. You get to hire your own attorney. So if Britney Spears was here, she would have been able to hire her own attorney, but she's in the wrong state. The other issue that I wanted to mention before we sign off is, very curiously so, the roles of the guardian ad litem, which is sort of the investigator, and the attorney for the protected person are not entirely separated in California. Again, this is what I'm hearing from the Legal Eagle channel. I don't know for sure. I didn't do my research, but from what that attorney said, the attorney who is appointed to represent the protected person is allowed to sort of supplant or set aside or disregard their client's wishes if they think that's what's best for them. That can happen in Nevada. So the guardian ad litem, who is the appointed investigator, they can do that. They are appointed to represent the best interests of the protected person. But the attorney that's appointed to the protected person cannot do that. They have total unwavering loyalty to their client, and they are required under the rules of professional conduct and under the law to argue whatever it is that their client wants, even if it's not what they feel is best for their client. They are the attorney for their client. They are appointed to that client. They are loyal to that client, and they have to fight for that client, even if it contradicts what everyone else in the case wants. So that is another thing that is disturbing with respect to California. I think that this video will fit really well into this channel because my approach is typically quite different from the other channels. They focus more on the policy issues, on whether it's right or wrong, and I kind of talk about those a little bit. But really, it comes down to, when you're on the proper person, it comes down to statutes, rules, and case law. And from what I have seen, the things that are occurring are within the boundaries of California law. They're not within the boundaries of Nevada law. If she was in Nevada, there would be no guardianship because she's not mentally incompetent. I talked about that a little bit, and I think I kind of went off on a tangent. But what I wanted to finish up with that sort of line of discussion was that you have the right to make mistakes. People have the right to make choices. They have the right to make bad choices. That happens all the time. People do things they shouldn't do, but that is their choice, and they suffer the consequences for those choices. Whether they ruin their lives, whether they lose all their money, whether they are thrown in prison, they suffer the consequences of those choices. The only type of person, from what I have seen in Nevada, that can be placed under guardianship is a person who has this inability to make choices because something is wrong with their brain. Usually it's the elderly, like when they're going through dementia or something like that. Sometimes it's younger people who have suffered a traumatic brain injury. It really seems to revolve around people who aren't able to remember, which makes sense. I mean, if you're going to make a decision, you make a decision based off of things that are going on around you. Like, you have your observations and your recollections, and so you make decisions. But if you can't remember, you can't really make a choice because you don't really have a sort of thought of what is going on to then form a choice. You kind of be making like random decisions, which is very different. I do agree that those people need to be placed under guardianship. I just couldn't imagine that. If I couldn't remember things, I would probably, I just paid a bunch of my bills. I'd probably forget that I paid him, and I would pay him again. Maybe pay him a third time, fourth time in the month, to drain my bank account, just thinking that I hadn't paid him yet because I can't remember. So that kind of situation is different. Those kinds of people I can understand, and that's what Nevada requires. It's standard here. In fact, we had a case published, I think it was Thursday or Friday, where this actually came up. District Court Judge Linda Marquis was presiding, and she denied the guardianship petition. She refused to place this married couple under guardianship, and the Supreme Court, apparently they didn't use the reason that she used, but they came to a different conclusion as to why she was correct, and they said that the law requires them to be incompetent, and they're not. They're not incapacitated, they're not incompetent, so no, they don't get to be placed under guardianship. So that makes me think that if Brittany Spears was under the jurisdiction of Nevada, she would already have terminated the guardianship, most likely, probably a long time ago. So that goes to show you guys, the system isn't fair unless you force it to be fair. It's not just going to automatically happen. And if people truly care about these issues, child custody, divorce, guardianship, conservatorship, unfortunately, we're going to just have to start taking control of these areas, because those people who are making the decisions are not doing those decisions in a way that benefits the rest of society. And it's such a sad place to be in a free country, in a democracy. It's such a bad place to be in the year 2021. You would think that things would have gotten better over time, but they just got worse. And it just seems like the greed just seems to fuel so much more of the decisions than it used to fuel in the past. Maybe it was always bad. For all I know, maybe it was always bad, and we're just figuring it out now because we have YouTube and the internet, and we can talk to each other, and we don't have to sort of wait around for the press to tell us things. We can just on our own kind of communicate through these new platforms. Maybe this is a problem that's always been around, and now people are becoming aware of it. I hope that this video was useful to my viewers. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them down in the comments below, and I will see you guys next time.